We see a lot of anger thrown at those who stands up and speaks out on the destruction of Éire. Most of this anger is from the establishment and their puppets. The politicians, journalists, NGOs, Marxists and the Irish Republican Socialist movement. Why does Irish Socialist Republicans hate Irish nationalism? Simply because they grew up with anger and hatred in their hearts. They learned more about hating the British than loving their own kin and embracing the uniqueness of their own culture and nation. What exactly is a nation? Nations are formed because there's a collection of people who share a common culture, history, language, ethnicity, religion, morals and ethics. These people then agree to form a nation because despite the vast array of differences between individuals, they all have enough in common to believe that what they share is a general vision of what's best for their people. Unfortunately, a nation dies when its people no longer recognises the importance of family and also forgets the basic principles of their ancestors who created that nation. They have simply lost their connection to what our ancestors fought and died to protect. Ireland's unique culture and heritage, and most importantly, our right to be a free sovereign nation, to protect our indigenous peoples from any further plantations. It's all very well to label people who put their nation, culture and race first and label them a racist. I have no allegiance to any other nation or race other than my own, nor have I loyalty to any other nation's people and culture. My only loyalty is to my own kin. This does not mean I hate anyone else's. My beliefs, being an Irish nationalist, is putting Ireland first, putting the Irish indigenous people first. Just like I believe in Africa, it should be Africans first, or China, Chinese first. Every nation has a duty to its indigenous peoples. My Irish brothers and sisters are my kin. Those with Irish blood soaked in our soil for centuries. Make no mistake, my nation, my culture and my race is under attack. And many immigrants who came here for a better life stands with the Irish nationalists. Not because they are anti-immigration, but because they know if Ireland falls to these globalist ideologies, that there will no longer be any other safe country left to flee to. We see tens of thousands of military-aged men coming into Europe, flooding our communities. No women, no children. This is all part of the United Nations Agenda 21 Migration Pact to destroy Europe. Men fleeing war bring their wives and children with them. Men go into war, leave their families behind. This is a war on our borders and our people. This is simply not immigration, it is an invasion. The push for multiculturalism is the eradication of Éire's culture, as the more dominant culture always eradicates the weaker one. We have a duty to protect our culture and our people. Diversity is simply the eradication of nations' indigenous population. It goes hand in hand with the Kalergi Plan. Richard Van Kalergi is the grandfather of the European Union, and his plan was to make all unique races and cultures extinct. The United Nations and European Union created a pact called Replacement Migration to replace the indigenous peoples of all nations. The United Nations Migration Pact also criminalises any criticism of immigration and labels it as hate speech. Now we see just one of the reasons to why Ireland pushes draconian hate speech laws. Laws to police your thoughts and your opinions. Replacement theory is not a theory, it's a fact. We see young Irish people forced out of Ireland every day with no chance of getting on the property ladder, whilst replacing them with cheap labour economic migrants who can work the jobs that the Irish cannot afford to work. But how do these migrants afford the cheap labour jobs that the Irish can't afford to work? Simply because the Irish social welfare gives them a home and resources that we refuse to give to our own young Irish. Anyone who calls out the blatant attack on our Irish brothers and sisters is labelled a racist. The term racist was coined by a communist called Leon Trotsky. Racism is a social construct commonly used by communists and Marxists to silence national patriotism. My allegiance is to my nation, to my culture, to my heritage and to my race. The only real racism in Ireland is created by left-leaning Marxist politicians, journalists, NGOs and trade unions. Simply, every part of the establishment who are intentionally trying to ethnically cleanse the race of my nation. I am loyal only to my own kin and my own nation, no one else's. So I give you my truth. You can either be a traitor to your nation and people and eradicate everything our great ancestors fought and died to protect, or you can put the love of your country, culture and race and look at your enemies in the eyes and say, if this makes me a racist in your eyes, well then I embrace it. I do not stand for hatred of anyone or anything. I stand today with my brothers and sisters for one reason, because of my love for my country and its people. A battle has come to us. It rages in our towns, our cities and on our very own doorsteps. The majority of Ireland knows there's something wrong. They know our country as we know it is being eradicated under the banner of progressivism. Our culture, religious beliefs and heritage are all under attack. Everything our nation was founded on. Our elderly struggles to heat their homes and our Irish families struggle to feed their children. We have 14,000 plus Irish homeless, yet we bring in tens of thousands of third world men into the communities that are already struggling both financially and with limited resources. But yet somehow our government have no difficulties in finding suitable resources and accommodation for these new immigrants. Those asleep, I ask, please open your eyes. A dark cloud looms over our land and we must fight so that the generations who precede us will not wake up one day as a despised and persecuted minority on the very land which is their birthright and is soaked with the blood of their ancestors. Our indigenous people are pushed aside to make way for those who are encouraged to come here, seeking entitlement at the expense of those who have been taught to wallow in self-hate and shame for the glorious deeds of our ancestors who created this great nation. Well, we say no more. We will not be shamed and we will not be silenced. We will take back what is rightfully ours by any means necessary and by the will of God. The time has come where mere words must give way to action, and you, the individual, must take up the struggle, or else risk being condemned to history as a traitor to your nation, your race, and to your very own children. Those of you who remain silent are enabling the destruction of our country and its people. The time has come to make a stand. Our nation has been ruined. This isn't the Ireland I remember. My Ireland was a much safer place with far less crimes before the Multicultural and Diversity Project. When the soil that our ancestors died to protect is under attack, we as a people have a duty once more to protect our nation and our land. How much more of our country are we willing to sell off? Ireland is dying, our nation, our culture, our heritage, all dying along with it. But as long as there is a spark of Irish pride, as long as the flame of Irish nationalism stays lit with the people like yourselves, there is always hope. Nationalism is simply the love of a nation, that's it. Internationalism, our globalism, is the eradication of all nations' culture, sovereignty and uniqueness. This is a war right now that we face as a nation. What kind of country do we want going forward is totally up to us. The Irish people, not the globalists. The Irish establishment would like us to believe that the neo-Marxist progressive future of modern Ireland is written in stone. But it's not written in stone, it's written in chalk, and chalk can be erased at any time. Are we destined to live in the communist, sustainable development, 15-minute smart prison utopia under a digital capitalist, socially communist World Economic Forum dictatorship where you will own nothing, be digitally tracked and traced and have zero freedoms unless permitted by the World Health Organization Pandemic Treaty? Or do we fight the international regime and take back our country? I can't tell you what the future of this country is going to look like, but for the first time there are people starting to ask the right questions, and that is the first step to making real change a possibility. We stand together as individuals against that common enemy. Put your ego and petty differences aside and stand as one, and we will be unstoppable. Who exactly is your enemy? Well, to know your enemy, you must understand your enemy. Who benefits playing divide and conquer, and how do they play it? Simply, if you collect 100 black ants and 100 red ants and you put them in a jar, nothing will happen. But if you take that jar, shake it violently and leave it on a table, the ants will start killing each other. Red believes the black is the enemy, while black believes the red is the enemy, when the real enemy is the person who shook the jar. The same is true in society. Men versus women, black versus white, straight versus gay, religion versus science, etc. Before we fight each other, we must ask ourselves, who shook the jar? And that answer is simple. Ask yourselves, who gains the most from keeping the people fighting amongst themselves? The Emperor. It is every single political party within our Dáil pushing internationalist policies. Whether it's Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, the Greens, or the left-leaning Marxist Sinn Féin, Labour, Social Democrats and People Before Profit, etc. Irish nationalists, hold your head high and face your enemies. Fight until you can't fight anymore. Never let go. Never give up. Never surrender. Keep fighting our corrupt government, those who are paid to represent you, the national people, but instead represents the International United Nations Agenda 21 destruction of our nation and the enslavement of its people. We need to get every last one of these globalist puppets out now. Éireann go bragh.